Hi everyone, and welcome back to Hauntora, the place where the stories are real, the darkness is earned, and nothing is ever quite what it seems. If you're new here, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what comes next. I'll be honest with you, I almost didn't post this one. Not because it wasn't ready, not because the research fell short, but because some stories get inside you, and these two didn't just get inside me, they stayed. They rearranged something, and I'm still not entirely sure what. I've been doing this long enough to know the difference between a story that scares you and a story that changes you. Tonight we have two of the second kind. Before we go any further, I need to say something I mean completely. The people who come back every week, who turn the lights off, and actually let these stories touch them, you're the reason this channel feels like more than a channel. You've built something here without even knowing it. So genuinely, quietly, thank you. Links are at the top of the description, always easy to find, always worth clicking. 2 stories tonight. The first one will unsettle you in ways you can see coming. The second one won't warn you at all. It crept into my thoughts so completely. The days passed before I realized I hadn't stopped thinking about it. Some stories don't let go. They just wait. When it's done, find me in the comments. Tell me where it hit you. I read every single one. Lights down. Get close. Let's begin. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. I've always been someone who values quiet, not the romantic kind of quiet people talk about when they've never actually had it. I mean the real kind, the kind that has weight. I moved to the mountains in my early 30s after a decade of working construction management in a city that never stopped making noise. Deadlines, crews, contractors, phones. By the time I was 32, I'd saved enough to buy a small property up in the hills, remote enough that my nearest neighbor was a 20-minute drive, and I went there without a second thought and without much of a plan beyond just stopping. I'm practical. I don't believe in much I can't see and measure. I fix things when they break, I plan ahead, and I keep to myself. That last part matters for what I'm about to tell you, because keeping to myself is exactly what I was doing when this started. It began at a gas station. I was about 40 minutes from home, making the drive I made twice a month into town to pick up supplies, groceries, hardware, odds and ends, whatever I couldn't order online and wait a week for. The station was the kind of place that hasn't been updated since the 90s. 2 pumps, a small convenience store that smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner, a single bathroom with a lock that didn't fully catch. I'd stopped there a dozen times. Nothing about that day was different from any other. There was a man inside when I went to pay. Somewhere in his 40s, I'd guess. Average height and average build. Nothing about him that would have made me look twice under normal circumstances. He made a comment about the weather and something about the roads getting bad in winter up in the hills, and I gave him the kind of short, polite answer you give strangers when you're not looking for a conversation. I paid, walked back to my truck. He followed me out. The next part is hard to describe without sounding like I'm dramatizing it, but I'm going to try to be precise, because precision is the only thing that makes it make sense. He said something to the effect of wanting to get coffee sometime. Phrased it normally enough. I told him I wasn't interested, kept it brief, got in the truck. He stood at the edge of the parking lot and watched me pull out. I thought about it for maybe 10 minutes on the drive home, categorized it as uncomfortable and moved on. That was a mistake. 4 days later. It was just past 2 a.m. I wasn't asleep yet. I'd been reading, had the lamp on low, the kind of half-awake state where sounds register but don't fully process right away. And I heard something from the direction of the window on the north side of the bedroom. Not the wind, not the house settling, something deliberate. I sat up. The window was open. Not the way I'd left it, cracked to 2 inches for air. Fully open. And there was a man halfway through it, one leg already inside the room, moving slowly, like someone who'd done this before and knew how to do it quietly. I shouted, I don't remember exactly what. Something loud and direct. He went back out the window, fast. By the time I got to it and looked out, he was already at the tree line. And then he wasn't anywhere. I called the police. They came, they searched the property, they found nothing. No footprints that survived the dry ground. No dropped equipment, nothing. And nothing inside the cabin was missing. Drawers undisturbed. Nothing moved. The deputy told me it might have been someone casing the property who got spooked, to call if anything else happened. I locked the window, put a brace in the track, and told myself that was the end of it. The next night, I found the photograph. It was on my bed, on top of the covers, centered like someone had placed it carefully. A printed photograph, not a phone screenshot, an actual print of me, asleep, in that bed, taken from the corner of the room, from the angle of the closet door. I stood there and looked at it for a long time. Think about what that means. Really think about it. He hadn't come in that night to take anything. He'd come in to leave something. And the night before, the night I'd caught him coming through the window, that wasn't his first time inside. He'd already been in, already taken that photo. The night I caught him, he was coming back. I installed cameras the next week. 4 of them, covering every entry point, motion activated, feeding to a local drive and a cloud backup. I checked the footage every morning like it was a job. I changed the locks, added motion sensor lights to the exterior. Did everything right. The photos kept coming. Not every night. That's what made it worse. Sometimes a week would pass and nothing. And I'd start to exhale, start to think maybe it was over. Then I'd wake up and there'd be another one on the nightstand. Always printed, always recent. I could tell by my own face, by what I was wearing, by the specific position I was sleeping in. He was still getting in, and the cameras caught nothing. No motion alerts, no footage, nothing but dead timestamps and empty rooms. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom, moved to the couch, changed my schedule, varied when I went to bed, tried to make myself unpredictable. It didn't matter. The worst of it was what it did to the inside of my head. Because here's the thing about a threat you can't see. Your brain fills in the gaps constantly. Every creak of the house, every shift in the dark at the edge of your vision, you start doing the math obsessively. How long was he in here before I woke up? How many times has he stood over me that I don't know about? I started staying awake until 4 or 5 in the morning, and then crashing from exhaustion, which just meant I was sleeping deeper and less aware of anything. He'd adapted his approach to match whatever I did, but that's not opportunistic behavior, that's patient behavior. I moved back to my parents' place for 6 weeks, 3 hours away in a suburb, a neighborhood with streetlights and houses close together and people who'd hear something if something happened. The photos followed me there. Same format, same printing. Me asleep in my childhood bedroom, in a house he'd never been to, that I hadn't told anyone I was going to. I went back to the mountain property after those 6 weeks because I decided, and this is the clearest decision I've made in my adult life, that I was not going to spend the rest of my life being moved around by someone else. I went back, and I planned, and I waited. I sat up in the bedroom like I was sleeping, clothes stuffed under the covers, phone propped to record, me in the closet with the door at a 3-inch crack and a clear line to the bed. I'd cleared the space on my side so I could move without sound. I waited 3 nights before anything happened. The 4th night, he came in. I heard him before I saw him. The specific sound of weight shifting on the floor near the window, the near silence of someone moving who's practiced at it. He crossed to the bed, stood there, and in the ambient light from outside, I could see his profile clearly enough. It was him, the man from the gas station. I came out of the closet and he ran. Through the bedroom door, down the hallway, through the back. I went after him. He was fast, faster than I expected. And he made it to the back field before I caught up enough to matter. I fired once. It was enough. He went down and got back up and kept moving, but differently. He was hit. He made it to wherever he'd left a vehicle. I never found out where. And he was gone. I called it in. Gave a full statement. The police identified him through the description, the gas station records, the partial prints they finally pulled from a photo paper edge they'd missed the first time. He was found at a clinic 2 counties over, treated for a gunshot wound to the foot that he'd tried to explain as a hunting accident. He was never charged with enough to matter. The DA said the evidence was complicated, that my statement was the primary thing, that photo evidence collected from a private residence through a legal entry had chain of custody issues. He had a lawyer. He had a version of events. The case moved slowly and then moved nowhere. He hasn't contacted me since. No photos, no window sounds. 7 years and nothing. I still check the bedroom before I sleep. Every night, same thing. Closet, corners, under the bed. Not because I think he's coming back. I've made my peace with the probability of that. It's just that somewhere in those months, my brain rewired the act of sleeping into something that requires a security sweep first. And I've tried to undo that. I've genuinely tried. The room's always empty. But I still check, because the one time I didn't check was the night he left the first photograph. And some part of me that doesn't respond to logic or time or 7 years of nothing has decided it's not done checking yet. I'm not the type of person who runs from things. That's worth saying up front, because what I'm about to describe could easily sound like panic, and I want you to understand that it wasn't. I spent 11 years working in data infrastructure for a logistics company in Baltimore. Methodical work, problem-solving work, the kind of job where you learn to stay calm when systems fail at 3 a.m. because losing your head doesn't fix the server. It just wastes time you don't have. I'm organized. I'm deliberate. And when I decided to leave the city, that was deliberate too. I'd been looking at the property for almost 8 months before I signed anything. A cabin on 12 acres in the hill country of West Virginia, 40 minutes from the nearest town, with a grocery store. No HOA, no neighbors within earshot. The access road was 1.5 miles of unpaved gravel that turned unpleasant in wet weather, which I knew going in and accepted. The cabin itself was solid, original structure from the early 70s, fully rewired in 2019, well insulated, a wood stove in the main room and a propane backup for the kitchen. I spent the first 3 months fixing small things, replacing a section of porch railing, re-caulking around the windows, learning which floorboards creaked and where. By November, I knew that place the way you know a place when you've been paying attention. Every sound it made, every smell, the way the wind came through the tree line from the northwest and hit the north-facing wall differently than it hit the south. The particular groan the porch roof made when temperature dropped fast. I knew the baseline. That matters. Because what started the night of the storm wasn't dramatic. It was just slightly off the baseline. The storm came in hard around 9. Not unusual for that region in late November. A front pushing down from the northwest, dropping the temperature 15 degrees in 2 hours, bringing horizontal rain and wind gusts that bent the younger trees at the tree line into shapes that looked wrong. I'd lost power before in storms. I had a generator, candles, a good headlamp, and enough firewood stacked on the covered porch to last 4 days. I was prepared. I made dinner, got the fire going, and sat reading until the power cut out at 3:40 a.m. I remember the time because I checked my phone when it happened. The inverter clicked on automatically and powered the essentials, the well pump, the fridge, but the lights went to battery backup and dimmed to about 60%. Normal. I went around the cabin and confirmed everything was functioning the way it should, banked the fire a little to carry through the night, and was heading back to bed when I heard it. A sound from the porch. Not the wind. I knew the wind. This was slower, more deliberate. The specific rhythmic creak of weight moving across old wood boards, one step at a time, stopping, then resuming. I stood in the hallway for a moment and just listened. My first thought was an animal. Black bear will investigate a porch, especially in late fall when they're still active in that part of the state. The firewood was stacked out there, and bears have investigated stupider things for less reason. I told myself that's what it was, went to the front window, and moved the curtain 2 inches to the left. There was a figure standing at the far end of the porch, not moving, just standing in the rain, facing the cabin, too tall for a bear, too still for anything that wasn't watching. I stepped back from the window and stood in the dark living room and let my brain do what brains do in that moment. I gave it 30 seconds to produce a reasonable explanation. Hunter taking shelter, lost hiker, someone whose car had gone off the road in the storm and who'd walked to the nearest light. All possible, all worth considering before I did anything that would embarrass me if I was wrong. I turned on the porch light. The figure didn't move, didn't react to the light at all, just stood there in the far corner of the porch, rain coming off the overhang onto their shoulders, face turned toward the door. I couldn't make out features. The angle was wrong, the rain was heavy, and whatever they were wearing was dark. But the posture was what got me. Most people, you shine a light on them unexpectedly in the middle of the night, they react. They raise a hand, they turn, they do something. This person just absorbed it like they'd been expecting it. I stepped back further into the room, away from the window. My phone was on the kitchen counter. I moved to it without turning on any more lights, because something in my processing had already made a decision that my conscious mind hadn't fully caught up to yet. I dialed 911, got a dispatcher, gave my address, and was told the estimated response time was 45 minutes minimum due to storm conditions and available units. I said understood and stayed on the line, and then I heard them at the door, not knocking. Not the hesitant noise of someone asking for help. This was methodical, testing the handle. Then a different sound. Lateral pressure on the frame. The specific sound of someone checking whether the deadbolt was the old style or the newer kind. I know that now because I looked it up afterward. At the time, I just knew it didn't sound like anything a person in trouble would do. Then the side window. I moved to the hallway, away from the front of the cabin. The sound at the window lasted about 20 seconds and then stopped, and the 15 seconds of silence that followed were worse than the noise had been. The front door came open, not an explosion of force, a controlled entry, the frame giving way with a single hard impact, the deadbolt pulling through the old wood like it had been designed to. One sound, then footsteps inside, 2 sets, maybe 3. I was already moving. The utility door at the back of the cabin, a secondary exit into the covered woodshed that connected to the back side of the property. I'd never used it as an exit before. I'd always thought of it as a construction leftover, an inconvenience. That night, it was the only reason I'm telling this story. I went through it without a coat, no shoes, just the wool socks I'd been wearing. Into the woodshed, through the back door of the shed, into the rain and the dark and the cold that hit me like stepping into water. I ran. Not blind, I knew the property. I went northeast, away from the access road into the tree line, because whoever these people were, they'd come up the road and the road was not where I wanted to be. The ground was saturated and I went down twice in the first 200 meters. Both times on the slope behind the cabin where the runoff had turned the soil to something between mud and water. Got up both times, kept moving. 15 minutes into the woods, I found enough signal to reconnect the call that had dropped. Gave the dispatcher my updated situation. She stayed on with me for the next 38 minutes until I saw headlights on the access road. 2 patrol units. The deputies cleared the cabin in 11 minutes. The men were gone. They'd taken my laptop, a hard drive, a camera I'd left on the kitchen table, my car keys, though they hadn't taken the car, which the detective later said suggested they were interrupted or on a timeline. They'd also opened every cabinet in the cabin, every drawer, the pantry. The detective said that pattern and the systematic search of storage spaces suggested they were looking for something specific, which implied they'd been in the cabin before or had information about what might be stored there. Nobody was ever charged, no prints of value, no vehicles seen on the road by anyone that night because there was no one on the road that night. The investigation stayed open for 7 months and then went effectively dormant. I did go back. That surprises people when I tell them, but the alternative was letting 3 men I never saw clearly decide where I lived, and I wasn't willing to do that. I replaced the doors, added cameras, proper ones, with local storage and cellular backup, reinforced the window frames, built a relationship with the county sheriff's office, the kind of relationship where they know my name and I know their shift schedules, and the utility door at the back of the woodshed. I had a contractor extend it, properly this time. Concrete lined, weatherproofed, running 60 feet into the hillside before exiting into a drainage easement behind the tree line, wide enough to move through quickly, with a door at each end that locks from the inside. The contractor asked me what I was planning to store in there. I told him nothing. What I didn't tell him was that the night I ran through those woods in wet socks, listening to my own breathing and the rain and nothing else, I made a decision about the kind of person I was going to have to become to stay in that place. Not scared, not paranoid, just different. The kind of person who builds exits before they need them. I sleep fine mostly. The cameras help. The new doors help. What doesn't help is knowing that they searched the cabin systematically, methodically, like they knew what they were looking for. And I still don't know what it was.